Good afternoon. I'm Will Ross with the Burn the Ship podcast, a podcast for business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs, and our community of followers. I've got a special guest with me here today. I've got John Ray. John is the author of The Generosity Mindset, as well as a longtime podcast producer. And I think he's got roughly 2,200 episodes produced to date. These may have gone up since the last time we spoke. But yeah, I've got a really good connection with him from our prior conversation. I'm looking forward to really sharing some more about his story, his journey, as well as just kind of how Burn the Ship has kind of navigated some similar paths and mutually been beneficial, and see how it's benefited him. John, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your book. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure, Will. Thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, we had several connection points there in that conversation.
Right.
So that was really pretty cool. And thank you for again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
So yeah, I'm a business consultant, business coach. I work with service providers on a lot of different aspects of their business, including their business development, their positioning, their understanding of client perceived value, which is different than the value that they see in their service or product, and then their pricing. And then I also am a podcast host and producer, and I have my own shows, and then I work with service providers mostly that want to do their own show and want to use that for business development purposes.
Beautiful. That makes so much more sense now, especially on that side of the house. So when you are looking at kind of the journey to where you are now, I know it feels like to me the book has been somewhat more recent. Mm-hmm. What came first? Was it podcast? Was it in the service industry with these service providers and doing that type of work that led to the podcast? Kind of shaped that sort of journey through how you got to where we are now. Just step by step, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So I was in corporate up until 11, something like that, and left corporate. I was one of those involuntary leaves that got on the other side and was glad that I was out.
Yes.
So working for a big, ugly major bank whose name you would recognize.
Oh, I'm sure.
And, started a business consulting and advisory practice and got into that for several years and realized that one of the things that was screwed up was the pricing part of the business. And that was in spite of the fact that I had quite a few years of investment banking experience, investment management experience, strategic planning work that I had done, at a pretty sizable level. And I didn't really have a great way to price my own services.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I clarified there. So it was what you found was that the pricing of others that were offering similar services were totally skewed and out of bounds, and that was something you were able to come in and offer that value plus at a price that was more in line.
Well, you're giving me more credit than I deserve, Will, but thank you for that.
Sure.
So no, I found out I had problems. I mean, and I saw that my clients had issues, and a lot of those issues revolved around not being able to adequately price their service. So that's what really got me passionate about it. And so when I speak to groups, I tell them right up front, hey, I've got all the T-shirts in the drawer. I mean, I know I've been there. Yes, that's right. That's
Absolutely.
why I could write a book about it.
I gotcha.
And so that's really how my practice morphed in that direction. And what I realized is a lot of service providers have pricing problems, and they a lot of times don't even know they have a pricing problem.
Sure.
Which seems odd, but it's true. And then kind of as time went on, coincidentally, I guess about 8.5 years ago, I got connected with Mike Salmon, who was opening up a studio, an affiliate of Business Radio X in North Fulton, where I sit.
Okay.
And that's how I got affiliated with Business Radio X, and eventually kind of built a business there.
I gotcha. All right. And so when you started to do, because I'm very intrigued by the podcast side of things. I know that our audience is as well. Obviously, they're here, they're listening. I mean, what was it that radio side of it that kind of led to that? Was it that relationship with the individual you just mentioned that started that? I mean, were those kind of those little factors, and what was it that kind of kept that continuation going to 2,200 episodes?
Yeah, well, I had zero experience at doing a podcast, so that was
Relatable.
that was not what I brought to the table there. What I brought to the table were relationships.
Okay.
That because I'm fairly well connected in North Fulton, and so Mike wanted someone to partner with him that had those connections, and that's how it got started. And unfortunately for me, the Business Radio X Network, they keep all the episodes up. So you could go back and hear my first one if you really want to.
Yes,
but
I know that exact feeling.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. But over time, I realized that my original business and the Business Radio X affiliate that I now own outright
Okay.
and manage had a symbiotic relationship, because our belief is that services providers, particularly high ticket services providers, ought to use a podcast to deepen relationships that lead to revenue. In other words, use it as a business development tool,
Sure.
and let the marketing come along for the ride.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've talked about that a little bit, and that's really been something that we've tried to leverage with our businesses here with MP Group, also with Safe Harbor Insurance. And it just seems like it's a lot easier for those folks to kind of have those open, upfront conversations when they don't feel like they're being sold as much as there's some value, and that there's something that, I genuinely can say that I've taken a lot away from all of my podcasts of just hearing these individuals and their stories, and everybody's unique, but we're all in that common thread too of trying to figure this out and knowing that we don't have the answers and needing to, have mentors and know that we're going to have to go over these hurdles. So we're on a similar journey, but in many, many different ways. And so I think it's been really special to see that and encouraging just as my own self as an entrepreneur and really trying to get things with Safe Harbor Insurance up and running.
Well, you're a great example of this, because it's, unfortunately, and I say this not tongue in cheek, I mean it sincerely. Unfortunately, people don't want to line up to talk about their insurance needs, and sometimes they really need to, right?
Oh, that has not been my experience at all, It's pulling teeth, brother.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's and people need to, right? This is one of those
Sure.
things they neglect. And so what a elegant, non-threatening way to open the door to build relationships than to say, hey, come on my podcast, let's talk about you, your favorite subject.
Absolutely.
You.
That's it. I mean, just my, coming up in the insurance industry, the school of thought with those who were my mentors at that time was really to be that outsourced, risk manager, or that kind of secondary. I want to know your business. I know I'll never know it as well as you do, but the only way for me to know my clients and their businesses to know them, right? And so it really does feel like a great introduction way. They get to know me a little bit. I get to understand their story. And the more I understand what keeps them up at night or what they may need, that makes my job a heck of a lot easier instead of trying to interpret or overlook something. So it's critical. How does that sort of play into your side of the business?
Well, I'm a big believer that relationships equal revenue, and
Sure.
the deeper your relationships, the more high quality they are, the more you're going to be able to build a business. That's the foundation of a services business, is that it gets into, you've got to have a relationship to have trust, to have openness, to have a willingness to let your hair down and express what your needs are to your service provider. You got to have all those things. And, a podcast is just a real good way to open the door.
I agree
to that.
I agree. What have been some of your kind of, turning a little bit here more towards the book, if you will, and I have not read the book. What is there some sort of correlation or connection between what you've done with the Business Radio X and with the podcast, or with relationships in general, that does kind of feed into the generosity mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the generosity mindset is when I mention this title and tell people what the book's about, they think it's counterintuitive, and it kind of is. That how is a book about pricing and getting better pricing? How is that generous, right? And and my contention. There's several points here. One is that uh, as professional services providers, we're here to serve. That's what we signed up for, is to
Yes.
be of service to others in our chosen field and beyond, and
Mm-hmm.
beyond. And what I argue in the generosity mindset is that often we have these mindsets, particularly those of us that control our own pricing.
Sure.
We have these mindsets such as imposter syndrome and the mindset of comparison to others, the mindset of helping, wanting to help everyone. We've got
Yeah.
these mindsets that get in the way of our ability to understand value and client perceived value and price to that value. And we're too busy thinking about ourselves and our certifications and all the things that are really about us, as
Yep.
opposed to the client, where the client sees value, what the client's needs, hopes, wants, dreams, and desires are,
Mm-hmm.
and leaning into that and stepping out of our own skin and getting into the head of our clients. And that is a generous position to be in. It's an act of generosity that a lot of people just frankly aren't used to these days.
Right. Or yeah, or not able to do, right? I mean, it's definitely something that takes some practice and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure some intention to be
Right.
able to do that as well. Because we have all these other distractions, be it, our families or whatever it may be outside of work. So yeah, to be able to really kind of get that mindset in each individual conversation with those relationships absolutely goes a long way. And I know for my own self that there's all sorts of imposter syndrome and all sorts of things that I've worked through from just mental health perspective and just really trying to understand my own self and my own value. And those things can be pretty big hurdles to work through. And then they can also be pretty recognizable to those that you're trying to sell to or to build relationships with. And you may not even notice them yourself, right? It's one of those things that they can see that, but you don't necessarily see it because you're the one living in those shoes.
Well, you brought up something really important here, and that's one of perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
the I guess you might call the big idea in this book, or I think the really big takeaway, if I can say this, is that clients see more value in you as a service provider than you see yourself. Now, and I argue why that is in the book, and we can talk more about that if you like,
Sure.
but if you, the basic reason for that is that clients, they see value in the intangibles that often we're not paying a lot of attention to. So, for example, um, while we're proud of the certifications that and education, the degrees we've got up on the wall, and our 5-step model, and our beautiful website, blah blah blah. What the client cares about is the fact that you know it's Will explains these things in a way that I can really understand.
Yep.
Or, hey, Will remembers my birthday every year.
Sure.
Or, Will actually came out to my kid's baseball game. Or better yet, got a signed baseball from his favorite Braves player that he's
Right.
been,
It's the little things that go so far.
and those have huge, huge, um, intangible value for the client. And see, often we don't think of these things. We don't even notice them. We may or may not do them, but the point is that those are the most memorable, and those have the most value for a lot of clients.
And it's, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
Well, and see, they can differentiate you because of that.
that's your genuine self, right? I mean,
That's
and those
right.
are those. Yep.
That's
Yeah.
right. So,
And,
I mean, there's a ton of people selling insurance, right?
oh
I mean,
my gosh, yes. I mean, I could hit a golf ball and hit how many offices from right here,
right, 14,000 within a 3-mile block,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
And but see, there's only one Will Ross.
That is something that I have gained more and more value for since being at Safe Harbor, if I can be quite frank, and
Mm-hmm.
even dealing with little things lately of insurance is expensive, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
one of those things where I want to offer value of I want to shop, I want to find a better deal. Well, I'm using my perspective of what I believe a better deal is versus what that individual believes a better deal is. And for a lot of people, I'm starting to find is I want to present to them the way that I always present, even if it's this crazy number that I think is way outside of bounds, because it's up to them to make that ultimate decision too, right? And that decision has a lot to do with who I am and how I present that and how our interactions are, not just a number. And I think that there's a lot more, and I'm hoping that's kind of in line with what you're saying here as well. It's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
It's just how critical we are as individuals to really know ourselves that, hey, it's not just what we think, it's also on that perspective of what they believe and what their experience has been. Because that's really what I believe drives our perspective is that experience that we've had in life.
Well, and what I contend is a couple things. One is this: when it comes to you, I mean, you don't control the premiums that insurance
It's true.
companies charge. So the pricing angle piece of it doesn't really apply to you. What does apply to you and what applies to all of us, whether we control our pricing or not, is the value people perceive and who we are and what we do. And that applies to all of us. And um, when you focus on other people, you get into their heads and you find out things that they see in you that you don't see in yourself because your perspective is warped. And warped in a good way. I mean,
Sure, sure, sure.
right, right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're focused on ourselves and doing the best job we can for clients, but at the same time, clients see value in places that we don't see. And so, unless we're having the kind of conversations that dig into that
Mm-hmm.
and uh, having value conversations with clients, then we don't understand that, and therefore we don't really see where our value is and cannot differentiate ourselves properly. And if we control our pricing, we can't price adequately.
I got you. How so within the book? How deep do you dive within that sort of asking those sort of proactive questions, or is it more along the lines of our own mentalities and just how you kind of get to that point where you're starting to see it differently as our own self and the perspective of others, or is it kind of the here's the instruction guides of how to really start to do this better, if you will, when you're having those relationship conversations?
Well, what I hope I've done in the book, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it. I'm blessed. So, yeah, I seem to have succeeded for at least the folks that have read it so far.
That's awesome.
Is that it? What people tell me is that it's a great instruction guide to rethink how they see their business, how they see themselves, and how they see their business, and how they see their clients, and to take it from fixing those mindsets or replacing those mindsets with a better mindset, the generosity mindset, and then um, building a business that
With that,
is much stronger because of that, or fixing a business with that mindset. So
absolutely.
that's the feedback that I'm getting from those that have read the book, and I'm excited about that. So
Like what was kind of that? I've got a lot of relationships in my life that'll talk about and it'll maybe at different periods of their life or what have you, but wanting to write a book. Was that always something for you? Is that something that kind of came about? What was really kind of is that always just been in the back of your mind? Where did that come from?
well, I've always written as
Okay.
part of my professional journey, and I was on the newspaper in high school and the newspaper in
Okay.
college. I was and then throughout my professional journey, I published articles and what have you. And as time goes on, people say again and again to me, "You need to write a book." And eventually, you if you hear it enough times, maybe you'll like actually
Listen.
stop and listen.
Yeah. Crazy how that works.
Yeah. And I think it got to a point for me, it's like, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And I think,
Sure.
you've got to, at a certain point, if I can borrow the name of famous podcast, you have to burn the ship and just and just get with it, right? And
Yes.
so that was really it for me. And I think uh, in this particular instance, really, I had to have a manifesto that was easy for people to pick up and read and
Yep.
understand, and um, where they really didn't have to necessarily pick it up believing that all this was the case, but
Sure.
that by the end of it they would, right,
They could
that,
buy into that.
that
Yeah.
they could buy into these ideas, and that's what I hope I've done.
Oh, and I mean, to just kind of flip it back around. I mean, it sounds like that's literally what you are practicing, what you're preaching, if you will, of what's been written in this book, right? You're speaking to your audience versus this is what I've done. This is how you should do it. That kind of bull in a china shop. I know I've had plenty of sales leaders that were, this is the way, this is that, and that can be very difficult for a lot of folks to kind of take on versus that sort of open perspective that's coming in and that acceptance of like, and now here's where we're going to go with that, right? And you can really, it's up to you to kind of interpret within your own line or whatever it is that you're doing from a business perspective.
Absolutely.
I dig that.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So I like to ask this question very direct. I think you kind of already answered it if I can be quite frank, but what was that burn the ship moment for the book? I'm writing it, it's time, we're doing it, or I'm never going to do it.
Well, here's the interesting thing about writing a book. A lot of people think the burn the ship moment is when they get on social media and announce they're writing a book. And do you know how many books have been written after people do that? I mean,
I bet you the percentage is under 10 or 5%.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
That's people do that because they think that's going to hold them accountable, and it doesn't. And so what I did was I paid a really good book coach and editor to work with me on my book, Anita Henderson. Shout out to Anita. And
Thank you, Anita.
yeah, Anita Henderson. And Anita, for me, once you stroke the check, like the ship's burned at that point, right?
that's the commit. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like I cannot not justify this money. This is like got to happen. And so the further I got into it, the better it got in terms of, and of course, the help that I got made it much faster than it would have been otherwise, made it
Absolutely.
a better book than it would have been otherwise. And so that was really, I think that for me, that was the moment in terms of the burn the ship moment when it comes to the book.
I think that's perfect. I'm going to kind of double you down on this one. So as far as, one of the things that I continue to try to keep top of mind for myself is asking for help, right? And then the value of those that have experience doing something that I don't know. I know that I learn every single day. I know there's so many things out there that I have no idea about that others, this is what they've done their whole life. What type of value for our audience, for your own self, your own experience, have you found from reaching out, just like you did with Anita or with others, to really grow your own self? And that's, I'm assuming has been somewhat communicated throughout your journey with those that you're having podcasts with or those that are going to read your book.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is just the experience. I mean, the longer you go, the more you figure out how little you know. I mean, that's part.
I'm there, man.
Yeah,
I turned 40 a couple weeks ago, so yeah, I'm getting closer and closer.
Happy birthday
those realization
to you.
moments.
Yeah,
sure.
happy birthday. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it, and I think part of it is just developing a humility and an openness to others that does not come natural for us human beings, because we're pack animals and we're very self-oriented, and that's kind of the way we survived the dinosaurs and whatnot.
Yeah, sure.
Right. As a species, that's the way we got to where we are. But that only goes so far. One of the things I talk about in the book is the concept of Ubuntu in ancient African thought, and that's the concept that I am because we are, and that's what that word means.
Okay.
And what it really gets at is what is a consistent message throughout all our ancient traditions, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's that we are a community and we benefit because we're in community. And there are strands of that thinking throughout our ancient tradition. And when you lean into that, you realize that I'm better off when I'm like that, right? I mean, I'm not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that my um, I don't have to worry about parading around and letting everybody know that uh, basically a lie, that I'm
Right.
whole. I'm not whole.
Yep.
I'm not fully complete, but I'm complete because I know Will Ross. I'm complete because I know Anita Henderson, or I know I have relationships with a wide variety of people that influence me and fulfill me and add value to my life, and hopefully I add value to theirs. And that's just a much more fulfilling way to live than it is to try to be the Lone Ranger.
Absolutely. I mean, just to kind of piggyback on that, I mean, we've got such a, especially with, younger folks, but also, I mean, all the way up, the keeping up with the Jones is a term we know very well.
Mm.
Social media is such a look at what I'm doing that's fun and exciting and wonderful in my life. And it really kind of paints this picture that's not really true. And I know that in my own journey, I've had plenty of trials and tribulations. But one of those things is the more that I've opened up about my junk, or be it, personal stuff, be it work stuff, instead of trying to fix it myself, instead of trying to do it on my own, the more I open up, the more I realize, hey, I'm not alone. There's
Mm.
so many people that have been on this very similar journey, but also it's that affirmation that, like, you're not doing this wrong. It's just that it's a lot easier if you have others that are there to help you with it. And so that's what I'm really hearing reiterated from you as well. But it's tried and true. I mean, it's a fact, but it's also really hard in this day and age, in my opinion, just because of what we see and what's in front of us, and the dreaded scroll. They can be dangerous things.
Well, certainly social media has a play in that.
Sure.
I think our uh, entrepreneurial culture has a lot of that. Our corporate culture has a lot of that.
Sure.
I mean, let's pick on corporate America because that's an easy target. I
Let's
mean,
go.
it is it is not. Uh, when you're in a lot of big corporations, it's not good for your career to come in and say, hey, I've got a special needs child I got to be home with for this or that, or I've got I'm in the sandwich generation right now dealing with um, high school kids at home that are running all over the place, and I've just moved mom and dad into the basement. Um, and all it that can be bad for your career.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are trained in our culture often that we've got to keep all these things to ourselves, and that we cannot reach out for help, or maybe not even just help, just a listening ear, right?
Right.
Just
Right.
somebody that's willing to say, hey, let your hair down and tell me about it.
100%. Yeah. Without. Yeah. I mean, I think we all. It's that. It's fear. It's ultimately fear, and we've built in some of that, and it's kind of getting out of our own way on
Yep.
that fear factor, and it takes stepping out of what's the normal. That really is, well, for me at least, that's what it took. Um, that's awesome, and that resonates very deeply with me. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit more, because I did tell you we're going to try to. I've told you I'm habitually long in my podcast, and I could keep going on and on. I have plenty of questions, but tell me just a couple of those sort of things as far as what you're doing right now. What's kind of next? What's coming up for you?
Mm-hmm.
There's probably plenty right there to start with.
Mm. Well, right now, when you write a book, one of the things that they don't tell you is, what a shameless plugger you've got to be about your
Sure.
book, right?
Yeah.
So I'm shamelessly plugging my book.
Nice.
That's that's the only way you're going to get the word out,
Yep.
so I'm definitely doing that. I've had a few people who um, I've resorted from reacting in a boisterous way to them, but have asked me when the next book is. So
That's a beautiful compliment
yeah,
right there.
that's a beautiful compliment, but I'm not ready to hear it.
Sure,
But
sure, sure,
yeah,
sure.
but I'm still luxuriating in the first one.
I
But
get that.
yeah, but so who knows? Maybe there's another one or two, or who knows in my future.
Okay.
Um,
Awesome.
but no, I just continue. I love the work I do with clients, and um, I love building relationships, and uh, I'm in a pretty good place right now in
I love
terms
hearing
of,
that.
yeah, being able to continue that work and uh, make my own little mark and hopefully improve the lives of others in the process.
I love it. Have an impact, leave an impact.
Yep.
I'm gonna turn this over on the sales side a little bit. So shameless plug. I mean, I struggle with the insurance conversation. Let's talk insurance.
Hmm.
But what creative ways have you come up with to get yourself out there in front of new audiences, or to really, to use your vocabulary, to shamelessly plug yourself out of, what are some of those ways? Just I'm intrigued.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing is to do what we're doing right now.
Yep.
Right? Is to go guest on podcasts. So again,
100%.
thank you for having me on, so I
Thank you
can,
for joining me.
yeah, shamelessly plug my book. But I think that's an overlooked uh, opportunity, right?
100%. Yep.
And so I think that's that's uh, that's one thing. I think when you just show up human is a big deal, particularly in the insurance business. Now, I mean,
I
right
love
now,
that line.
yeah, right now, let's see, as we record this, it's October the 29th.
Yep.
And, what's going on right now? Well, they're about to have health insurance, uh, re-enrollments,
Yep. The
right?
pool's opening. Yep.
Yep. And guess what's happening? If you're on LinkedIn like I am, I've got one or two a day health insurance professionals. I'm gonna put it in quotes
Sure.
that
Sure.
that are pitching me on how they can help me with health insurance, and I don't know
Hmm.
them from Adam's house cat.
Right.
Now, that is not the way to build a business. You may get a few clients that way, but you're not going to get any very good ones.
Yes.
And I just think when you show up, and I talk about this in the book,
Okay.
when your first uh, when your default gear is I'm here to help regardless of whether that means you write a check to me or not.
Mm-hmm.
When you show up that way
Yep.
and people see you that way and you really act that out every day, you
Yes.
will build your business. You'll get
100%.
business. Um, and that's your personal brand. And you
Yes.
don't have to worry about shining up a great social media presence or all these other little marketing dibs and dabs that the marketers want us to do.
Right.
Um, that's your reputation. That's the way people talk about you when you're not in the room, and that's a good place to be.
100%. That resonates deeply as well. I mean, it goes back to and this feels like a cheapen. I don't want to cheapen this, but it's those type of relationships that are sticky. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's not, you're not going after somebody who's, they're going to move on to the next person because it's just a price thing, and they've got a flashier ad, or they've got, more presence and whatever it was that originally grabbed that attention to bring them to you. It's something that's deeper than that. And I think that there's so much to be said about that, just from my own success, but also just from what I admire about others, and then what I'm also trying to build around me. So that resonates deeply for sure. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And
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 it's fun.
and what happens if when you do that is your clients will look out for you. I mean, they will look for ways to refer you, and they're proud to refer you.
You're right. Yep.
And when you ask them for referrals, they're happy to give them to you,
Yes.
because you've proved yourself to them. And so you really get to a point like a client of mine who is a consultant, and his business is so active, he doesn't even have a website, doesn't need one. he's he's in a business where he's not legally required to have one,
Right.
right? And so, but he's in a very niche kind of consulting business, and everybody knows him, and everybody knows he's the guy to call if they've got this particular problem. And you know, you just can't beat that deal.
That's a fact. I've had a couple of relationships, and I'll just go ahead and jump into it. It's very personal, but it's all good. It was a therapist for a time in my life that I was working with, and originally when I was speaking with him, kind of in that original interviewing process, he's like, what do you know about me? And he had been referred to me, and he was like, what else do you know? And I was like, well, I went to your website, and it looked like it was from the days of DOS, right? I mean, it is so old school. I mean, it's just there's nothing really there. Maybe a phone number, a picture from 25 years ago.
Right.
And he's like, oh, I need to update it. I was like, no, you don't, because that lets me know that that's not something that you need, right? That's not, you don't need to go out there and pitch all of this, fluff and glitter and whatever. You're good enough just as you are. You're supporting yourself. You have plenty of clients. You're getting referrals. And not to say that websites aren't important, that those information topics aren't, but it's something that to look at it from that perspective, it's like, yeah, you've created what you wanted to. It's not, you're not trying to put wrapping paper or put a bow on something that you're not. So I find it very genuine when I do run across those certain circumstances where a situation like that can kind of, show itself of, no, it may not be a lack of effort. It's they're busy. They're doing what they have set out to do, and doing that for those that they've told that they would do for. So I'm right there with you on that.
Yeah, you know what, Will, I have a feeling that like your friend and mine, if they actually got an up-to-date website, a lot of the people they know might question them. What in the world are you doing?
Right.
Yeah, right. Because that is not who you are.
Sure.
We're just happy with the person you are. So
That's it. That's it. And it's always funny. And a lot of times when you do ask those questions, if they're open with you, you'll find that there is something that's going on there, right? They may need to be making a little bit more. They may need to be this, but I wouldn't have known that unless I had that relationship, and they didn't have it with me, so that we can help each other in that moment. And so I'm right there with you. But yeah, I like the old school stuff, and especially with the websites. No glitter. Well, let's close this out just so that our listeners are those that are still with us. Thank you. Do you have any words to leave us with? I'd love to continue conversation with you offline, just to be completely candid and direct with you.
Sure.
But in this moment and for our podcast, I mean, is there anything that you can leave with our audience, just as far as from your journey, or just words to live by, or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would underline that others see more value in you than you see in yourself. And I think that's true in a lot of ways, in a lot of situations. It's not just true when you've got a professional services practice.
I totally agree.
And so I think that's a good message to lay on our insecure teenagers.
Yes.
Our friends who are questioning themselves wherever they are.
Sure.
Is you have more value than what you see, because you're not asking other people about the value that you have.
Right.
And that's really the big picture message of my book, is that others see tremendous value in you and the work that you do. And if you're just focused on you and your own perspective, then you're missing out on that. And you
are missing out.
Yeah, and you are potentially wallowing in those self-limiting mindsets that hold you back, not just from a business point of view, but just from life.
Enrichment of life. I couldn't say. Yeah, that's it. 100%. All right. Well, I'm ending it right here, because now I know that I need to read the book. Where can we purchase the book? Amazon, website?
Well, as the old saying goes, where all fine books are sold. So you can go to Amazon. You can go to your favorite local bookstore, which I always encourage.
You're local too. That's awesome.
Yeah, you can go to your local bookstore, and if they don't have it on the shelf, you can order it, and they'll get it for you. There's also a Kindle version if you like the electronic version.
Yep.
So yeah, it's out there pretty much wherever good books are sold.
Nice. The Generosity Mindset. John Ray. John, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to future conversations with you. I know there's a lot for me to learn, and I'm sure I'm going to have some questions after I read your book for you too. So I know how to get in touch with you.
You sure do, and I appreciate you, Will. Thanks again for having me, and thanks to your listeners for hanging in with us.
I'm right there with you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Thank you, John. We'll talk soon. See you. team.